The Secretary of State and First Minister, our two governments are collaborating more closely than ever before. This means that we can deliver for Wales in new ways on the NHS and on rail, as well as creating new job opportunities through delivering free ports, establishing investment zones and developing our industrial strategy to attract investment in critical areas such as offshore wind.
Richard Baker.
Mr Speaker, does the Minister agree the close collaboration the UK and Welsh governments have undertaken to deliver the industrial strategy is an essential element of this government's plans to deliver strong economic growth throughout the UK? Would she explain how this joint working between both governments will help Welsh industry? And does she agree that the SNP government in Scotland should take a similar approach so we reap the full benefits of our great partnership of nations so badly undermined by the reckless actions of the previous government?
I do indeed agree with the honourable member that the SNP could indeed learn a thing or two about our collaborative approach to securing economic growth in Wales. Our new industrial strategy is central to our growth mission and our plan for change. The Secretary of State has established an innovative economic advisory group to ensure that the UK and Welsh Government business leaders, trade unions and experts can work together to pursue opportunities for growth and jobs and attract investment.
Amy Stone.
Mr Speaker, further to that answer, I see from recent press coverage that the SNP government is once again banging on about another independence referendum. This is despite the Supreme Court's ruling. So could I ask the government to make it crystal clear to devolved governments that they do not have the power to arbitrarily instigate independent referendums? Thank you.
Mr Speaker, I can confirm that the honourable member is absolutely right in what he says.
Steve Witherden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Number 6, please, Mr Speaker.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I will take questions 6 and 11 together. Since July, we have driven over £1 billion of private investment from Erin Holding and Kellogg's into Wales, creating and sustaining over 400 well-paid jobs in manufacturing. Our Welsh free ports and investment zones will together unlock billions in private investment and aim to create at least 20,000 jobs across all 4 corners of Wales.
Steve Witherden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the news that the Secretary of State has signed a memorandum of understanding on the 4 Welsh growth deals with Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Rebecca Evans. Could she outline how this UK-Welsh Government partnership will deliver the well-paid jobs and economic growth needed in areas like Montgomeryshire and Glyndŵr?
Well, indeed, Mr Speaker, the Memorandum of Understanding signed recently between the UK and Welsh Governments further demonstrates our commitment to working together to deliver economic growth throughout Wales. The UK Government has invested £790 million into Wales growth deals, including 110 into the Mid-Wales growth deal, which aims to leverage up to 400 million of public and private sector investment in the region and create up to 1,400 additional jobs.
Rachel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In places across the UK, including in my constituency of Wrexham, too many young people have fallen through the gaps for too long, meaning that they can miss out on job opportunities, education and gaining the critical skills essential to getting on in life. Can I ask the Minister what measures she is taking to ensure that young people can seize the opportunities of our growth mission to ensure they are not left behind and help them to maximise their potential?
Well, Mr Speaker, today my Right Honourable friend the Chancellor confirmed that we are moving forward with the £160 million Wrexham and Flintshire investment zone, focusing on the area's strengths in advanced manufacturing, leveraging £1 billion of private investment over the next 10 years and creating up to 6,000 jobs. Growth is integral to creating the opportunities that young people need to get on in life.
Will Stone.
Question number 7, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, we on this side have long been committed to animal welfare. Indeed, it was my privilege under the previous Labour government to serve on the committee stage of the bill which became the Animal Welfare Act 2006. In our 2024 manifesto, we committed to further improve animal welfare, including ending puppy smuggling as he rightly points out, this particular issue is in fact devolved to Welsh Government.
Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for the response. I'm incredibly passionate about animal welfare. I've got a dog and a cat myself, and to the most part, our country is an animal-loving country. That's why I find it so shocking that we still have these practices like greyhound racing that treat animals as disposable. If they don't run fast enough or if they get injured, they get binned off. And some of them are still spending 80% of their life in kennels. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss this further? Thank you.
I would be happy to meet with the honourable gentleman.
Okay. Richard Ford.
Please, Mr. Speaker.
I'm working with the Energy Secretary to ensure that Wales plays a leading role in reaching our net zero targets and clean power by 2030 by supporting floating offshore wind, onshore wind, hydrogen, nuclear, tidal and carbon capture. We are seizing the unique economic opportunity of net zero to boost growth and create jobs across Wales.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In relation to floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea, the Secretary of State said that floating offshore wind represents a golden opportunity, that not just for meeting net zero targets, but for lower energy bills, for new jobs and for the industries of the future. Does the government think that these opportunities from offshore wind can extend from the Celtic Sea into Cornwall and Devon too?
The economic opportunities of floating offshore wind are very significant, and obviously the Celtic Sea is a big area covering areas from England and from Wales as well. So we are working closely to seize that economic opportunity of flow to deliver jobs and growth, and we'd like to see economic growth and jobs right across the United Kingdom.
Right. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Damien Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1, please.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Communities across the United Kingdom have been hit hard by Storm Eowyn. I spoke with the leaders of the devolved administrations in Scotland and Northern Ireland over the weekend to work with them on support that's required and to pay tribute to all those responding on the front line. Mr. Speaker, kick-starting economic growth is the #1 mission of this government, put more money in people's pockets and deliver on our plan for change. Today, the Chancellor announced our next steps to deliver the plan for change. A new Oxford-Cambridge corridor, redeveloping Old Trafford and supporting new runway at Heathrow. We're removing the barriers to investment, supporting innovation and going further and faster to boost growth. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Mr. Speaker, this April the state pension will increase by £470 and over the course of this Parliament by up to £1,900, benefiting millions of pensioners. Does the Prime Minister agree that means testing the state pension would do severe harm? And will he confirm that this government will always protect the state pension and the triple lock?
Let me be absolutely clear, Mr. Speaker. There will be no means testings of the state pension under this Labour government. We're committed both to the triple lock and to the principle that people should receive pension based on their contribution, regardless of their wealth. And he's right to say 12 million pensioners receiving £470 increase in April. And when people like the Leader of the Opposition say they want means testing, that means a cut. The difference is they cut pensions, we're increasing them.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Benrock.
Mr. Speaker, may I take this opportunity to solemnly commemorate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and we remember the 6 million Jewish men, women and children who were murdered. The Holocaust stands as a unique evil in human history. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister set his growth test. He said, if a policy is good for growth, the answer is yes. If it's not, the answer is no. This morning, the Chancellor embraced a series of Conservative policies. Although many are welcomed, they will take years to deliver. Mr. Speaker, when Conservatives left office, we had the fastest economic growth in the G7. But What is the government doing for growth now? It's destroying it. Let's look at the employment bill. The government's own figures say it will cost business £5 billion a year. It clearly fails the Prime Minister's growth test. Will he drop it?
Mr. Speaker, I think the proposition they left a golden inheritance was tested on the 4th of July, which is why they're standing there. But she asked what we're doing. The ONS say we've got the highest investment for 19 years. PwC, second best place to invest in the world. IMF upgrading growth, predicted fastest growing major economy in Europe. Wages up, inflation down. Mr. Speaker, there's more to do. We're reforming planning and regulation, building the new homes that we need, supporting a third runway at Heathrow. And as she admitted to the CBI in November, there's no point me just complaining about Labour, she said. It's obvious that we Conservatives lost the confidence of business. We're not taking lectures from them.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to talk about the employment bill because he doesn't know about it. Last week, he misled the House. He was not on top of his own education bill, listening to
Sorry. We can't accuse the Prime Minister of misleading the House. No. Well, he can't do it. I'm sure there's words that you would prefer to use.
Mr. Speaker, last week he claimed to have laid down an amendment that he had not made. He doesn't know what is going on in here or out there. Last week, I spoke to a woman running a business in Exeter. She is terrified of taking on new staff. She is struggling to keep her head above water, dreading what this government will do next. She's not alone. The Federation of Small Businesses says 92% of small employers are concerned about the employment bill. Clauses 1 through 6 make it harder for business to hire new employees, often young people looking for their first job. This isn't an employment bill, it's an unemployment bill. Given these clauses, will he drop his bill and show that he is not anti-growth?
Mr. Speaker, we believe in giving people proper dignity and protection at work. That's why we're proud of our record supporting workers. They consistently vote against any protection for working people. And her consistent refrain is that there should be less. But, Mr. Speaker, we are driving growth on behalf of working people. Good work rights are consistent with growth, and every good business knows that. And on top of the planning reform, the building the houses, supporting aviation, the Chancellor this morning spoke of the Oxford-Cambridge growth corridor, redeveloping Old Trafford, manufacturing at East Midlands Airport. We want to grow the economy. The only policy she's got is to shrink pensions.
Mr. Speaker, all his ideas are the ones that we thought of. He needs to make sure that we deliver for growth now as well as the future. To grow our economy, we must get more people off sickness and welfare and into work. Clauses 8 and 9 of the unemployment bill take us in the opposite direction by increasing entitlements. His government itself estimates that these changes will increase business costs from £600 million to £1 billion a year in sick pay. That will mean higher prices, fewer jobs, less growth. Will he drop these measures from the bill?
Prime Minister? No, Mr. Speaker. I think they're good for workers and good for growth. This is the same argument they made against the minimum wage and every protection for workers. And she says they're their ideas. Mr. Speaker, she says she's in support of a third runway at Heathrow. Her Shadow Transport Secretary says that it would be calamitous. The Shadow Business Secretary is busy writing letters opposing airport expansion in his own backyard. Shadow Chief Secretary says the Oxford-Cambridge idea is flawed and he's against it. We're the coalition of builders, they're the coalition of blockers.
Mr. Speaker, he forgets his own Chancellor blocked an airport in her constituency. They are hypocrites, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about this employment bill. Part 1 of the bill means a new employee could start a job in the morning and take their employer to a tribunal that afternoon. It is no wonder that this bill has been called an adventure playground for lawyers. This bill is terrible for business, but it is great employment for lawyers. I know the Prime Minister loves the legal profession, but he needs to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader. This is another measure in the bill that fails his growth test. Will he show some leadership and drop it?
Mr. Speaker, I understand she likes straight talking. She's talking absolute nonsense. She knows, and anybody who understands anything about the bill or any employment law will know you can't start in the morning and go to the tribunal in the afternoon. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know she's not a lawyer. She's clearly not a leader. If she keeps on like this, she is going to be the next lettuce.
Mr. Speaker, he does not know what his bill is doing. He should listen to business who are terrified of this bill. The only workers he cares about are lawyers, but it is not just lawyers benefiting from this bill. Who else benefits? It's not taxpayers. They will be paying for even more welfare. It's not young workers. They won't get their first break. It's definitely not businesses. They are being hammered with yet more burdens. Who benefits, Mr. Speaker? Who benefits? It's the trade unions. It's the trade unions. Part 4 of the unemployment bill, Part 4, they haven't read it, Part 4 of the unemployment bill is the biggest expansion of trade union powers for a generation. Exactly. Thank you. The public will have heard them cheer. Rather than deregulating for business who create growth, he's deregulating for the unions. Clause 61 alone reduces the notice period for strikes to just 1 week. Given strikes are catastrophic for growth, will he drop Part 4 of the bill?
Mr. Speaker, it's good for working people and it's good for the economy. And she should keep up. The CBI have welcomed our positive steps this morning. Their quotes. The Chancellor's just given a brilliant speech on the economy, fixing the mess they left and growing our economy. CBI said they celebrate the positive leadership, a clear vision to kickstart our economy. That's the difference. We're growing the economy. They left it in a complete mess.
Mr. Speaker, the arrogance of the Prime Minister is that he thinks that it's his government that creates growth. He's wrong. It is business that creates growth. Our economy is built by entrepreneurs, risk takers, and the hard graft of working people. They know that you can't tax your way to growth. You can't borrow your way to growth. You can't legislate your way to growth. Other countries are serious about freeing business from red tape. President Trump is doing it in America. Argentina is taking a chainsaw to regulations. Even the EU is not going as far as this left-wing government. This bill will put us at the bottom of the pack. Add it to the jobs tax, the family business tax. It's no wonder wealth creators are fleeing Britain in droves. The Chancellor is desperately trying to save her reputation. She knows Labour have damaged growth. This bill manifestly fails the Prime Minister's own growth test. If he won't drop the unemployment bill, what is the point of his growth test?
She's got a nerve. They broke the economy, completely destroyed it. They broke the health service, completely destroyed it. They've ruined us on prisons and everything else you can mention. They failed on every front. They're in no position to give us lectures on anything. And she says that she accepts they failed. They're changing. They've learnt absolutely nothing.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's action last week to tackle rogue traders who installed faulty home insulation, affecting many of my Luton South and South Bedfordshire constituents. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that Labour's Warm Homes plan will tackle fuel poverty and bring down bills for families as part of our plan for change?
Well, I thank her for that question. The party opposite have got a lot to answer for in the failing system that they've left behind. We've taken immediate action to ensure consumers insulating their homes are not let down again. We're investing £3.4 billion through our Warm Homes plan to upgrade 5 million homes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I take this opportunity to thank the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust for all their work in commemorating the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and say what a privilege it was to meet Holocaust survivors at their Guildhall event. When the honourable member, my honourable friend for North Devon, and I recently visited a hospital in Barnstaple, a surgeon there told us that it was like a ticking time bomb. He explained that a hospital that size needs 12 operating theatres to meet demand. They've got just 4. The last Conservative government promised to rebuild it, and we all know that was a hollow promise. Now, the North Devon District Hospital is one of 9 across the country where their urgent rebuild programme has now been postponed for over 10 years. So will the Prime Minister meet honourable members whose constituents' lives are being harmed by this delay to see if there's any way we can bring these urgent projects forward?
Well, can I join him in his comments about the Holocaust survivors that we met earlier this week? It was incredibly moving, as it always is, and I was struck by the fact that there were so many in the gathering that we were at, and we're unlikely to see so many in one place like that again, and we must never ever forget. On the question of hospitals, look, I think people across the country are right to feel angry and betrayed and frustrated at the last government's non-plan on hospitals. It was unachievable, it was unfunded, it was empty promises. Under them, these hospitals would never have been built. Our funded plan, backed by the investment we've put in, will deliver them. We will take such steps as we can on hubs, etc., to advance quickly on waiting lists and operations, as he knows, and I'm more than happy to talk or to make sure that all constituents and members can meet relevant ministers.
David.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister told me that it was going to take 3 years before social care reforms could be implemented. Now he's saying that urgent hospital rebuilds are going to take more than a decade. My honourable friends and I will keep coming back to this issue. If I can turn to economic growth, the Chancellor has now admitted that we need to go further and faster in the pursuit of economic growth, and we agree. But the Prime Minister knows we believe that means setting aside his objections to a UK-EU customs union, so our country can go further and faster in rebuilding our trading relationships with our European neighbours, especially with the threat to world trade posed by Trump's tariffs and Trump's trade wars. But if he won't change his mind today on a customs union, when he goes to Brussels on Monday, will he confirm to the House that he will open negotiations for the UK to join the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention so we can start removing the growth-damaging trade barriers set up by the Conservatives?
Our number one mission is growth. That's why we've set out all the initiatives over the last 7 months, particularly the ones this morning. He knows, in relation to the reset with the EU, which we're determined to achieve, that we have clear red lines when it comes to the single market and the customs union. So he knows where we stand on that.
Debbie Abraham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today's Joseph Rowntree Foundation report on UK poverty not only highlights who is most likely to be poor, but also the scale and increase in deep and enduring poverty. I was encouraged by the Prime Minister's response to me before Christmas at the Liaison Committee, where he explained and acknowledged that disabled people experience poverty because of their extra costs, and that while over 2 million disabled people can and want to work, many others cannot and should receive adequate support. Many vulnerable claimants are worried following speculation that the £3 billion of savings to be found in the Social Security budget may impact on their disability benefits. Will my right honourable friend agree with me that language matters and that their concerns must be heard? Yeah.
Well, I thank you for raising this, and I know it's an issue that she's deeply concerned about and campaigns on. The rise in poverty, Mr. Speaker, caused by the mismanagement of the economy by the party opposite is unacceptable. Our approach to social security will ensure that work is accessible to as many people as possible as a route out of poverty. And, Mr. Speaker, that includes the new Connect to Work programme, expected to help 100,000 disabled people find and stay in work.
Gavin Robinson.
Speaker, may I firstly thank the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster for their sterling support over the last number of days for Northern Ireland in the aftermath of Storm AO, and it's greatly appreciated and demonstrates how well the Union works. Mr. Speaker, on the 15th of August 1998, the fragility of peace in Northern Ireland was shattered when the real IRA detonated a bomb in Omagh town. 29 people died and a further 2 unborn twins never saw this world. Through the dignity and the stoic campaigning of Michael Gallagher, whose son Aidan died, a public inquiry was secured through the courts, who recommended in 2021 that the Irish government should similarly hold an inquiry to understand what could have been prevented, given the cross-border nature of this atrocity. The bomb was prepared in the Irish Republic and transported from the Irish Republic. Will he use his good offices to ensure that truth is delivered and justice arrives for the families of those who so needlessly lost their lives from Irish Republican terrorism?
First, on the question of the storm, can I assure him that we will continue to work with the leaders in Northern Ireland to ensure that we deal with what was really devastating in Northern Ireland for very many people still without power and all the associated problems that are associated with that. In relation to the Omagh bombing inquiry, I thank him for raising this. It was a heinous and cowardly terrorist attack, and it shocked the world. Our thoughts are with the family members now taking part in commemorative hearings this week. I do welcome the Irish Government's commitment to cooperate with the inquiry. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland has raised with the Irish Government the importance of working together on addressing these and all legacy issues, and I'm grateful for him for raising this very serious and important issue.
Jack Abbott.
Mr. Speaker, the Ipswich Northern Bypass is a project of local, regional and national importance, one on which the future of our town and county hinges. But this critical project has been gathering dust for years, repeatedly blocked by people who refuse to act in our long-term interests. The Prime Minister has set out how our government will back the builders over the blockers. Will he now back the builders in my town and make this a project of national significance through our plan for change?
Well, he's been relentless in seeking to boost growth and investment in Ipswich and Suffolk, and the gridlock his constituents face underlines the failure of the party opposite to deal with this when they had the chance to do so. Mr. Speaker, we will fast-track decisions on at least 150 major economic infrastructure projects to kick-start growth, and I will make sure he gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the issues of concern to him.
In room.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my right honourable friend said earlier, last week North Devon District Hospital got the devastating news that investment would be delayed 10 years beyond 2035. In the 5 years since the last government's empty promises, our hospital's maintenance backlog has grown to over £40 million. Given that £200 million has reportedly been spent just on consultancy fees for the new hospital programme, what funding for extra maintenance will be available for those hospitals that now face another decade of waiting?
I thank him for raising this, and his constituents will be angry and frustrated at the empty, unfunded promises left by the Conservatives. Let's be clear, under their non-plan, North Devon District Hospital would simply not have been delivered. It's not been delayed, it was never going to be delivered, and they know it, he knows it, his constituents know it. We have put in place a funded, deliverable plan that will see the hospital built, and will work closely with the Trust to accelerate work. And the party opposite really owe his constituents an apology.
Deirdre Cosson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Children in Ealing Southall will be sleeping on sofas and on living room floors tonight due to 14 years of failure from the Conservatives. Ealing Council has joined over 100 councils trying to remove the barriers to give these kids a decent home to live in, something the party opposite don't seem to care about. As part of the government's plan for change, will the Prime Minister look at the 5 solutions put forward by these councils so we can secure the future of council housing for those children sleeping on the floor tonight?
Well, she's right to raise this very serious issue. We are committed to working with every council to deliver the biggest increase in social and affordable housing in a generation. We're immediately taking action to reform the right to buy, to enable councils to borrow more cheaply, and investing in affordable homes programme.
Paul Cullen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I entered politics, active politics, after an attack in my home was misused by others to promote their anti-EU, anti-immigrant agenda. My life was saved by 2 brave police officers from Wimbledon Police Station. But as a family, our lives were transformed by a restorative justice session organised by the charity Why Me, where we met one of my 4 attackers in prison. Will the Prime Minister meet with me to discuss how his government can give restorative justice greater emphasis and put victims at the centre of the criminal justice system, reduce recidivism and cut crime and costs?
Can I send my sympathy for what the honourable member experienced? It must have had a profound impact on him and, of course, on his family. I too have seen the power of restorative justice, which does enable victims to receive answers, and perpetrators have to face the human cost of their crimes. Under the Victims Code, all adult victims must be told about restorative justice and how to access it. We can always do more, and I'll ensure that he gets the meeting that he wants with the relevant minister.
Charters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to announce that this summer I'll be going on paternity leave again for baby number 2. And may I congratulate the Secretary of State for Scotland on his new arrival. The Chancellor spoke brilliantly this morning on growth, and I'm pleased to reveal that new JRF research shows that by increasing paternity leave, we could increase economic growth by £2.6 billion a year. So can I ask the Prime Minister, will he review statutory paternity leave? And from one father to another, will he meet with me and the Dad Shift to support and discuss how we can support new parents?
Well, can I wish him and his wife all well with their new arrival? We are conducting a review into parental leave because you can't grow the economy if parents have to choose between work and their children. And thanks to the Employment Rights Bill, which they oppose opposite, 30,000 more fathers will get paternity leave. And that's the difference, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition wants to roll back parental rights. We're extending them.
Duffield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 2012, the Drax power station has been given £7 billion of green subsidies by the government for burning 27 million trees per year. That's enough money for 5 years of pensioners' winter fuel payments. While Ofgem has been asleep at the wheel, a recent KPMG report has concluded that Drax claimed those subsidies illegally. Will the Prime Minister today demand to see that KPMG report before giving another £1 of taxpayers' money to Drax?
Thank you for raising this. It is an important issue. Of course, we will look at the report, but I don't join in her description. We will look at the report.
Back day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you well know, Lancashire is a wonderful county full of great businesses and hard-working people. But for too long, we've been held back by an outdated 2-tier council system. The government's English devolution bill is a massive opportunity for us to get back in the fast lane and catch up with the likes of Manchester and Liverpool. So will the Prime Minister join with me in calling on all Lancashire leaders to work together in the interests of our residents, putting aside political differences and self-interests, and move forward in good faith to unleash Lancashire's huge potential?
Well, he, of course, was given decades of service to his community, Mr. Speaker. I'm a firm believer in moving power out of Westminster into the hands of those with skin in the game. That's how you boost growth, create opportunities and drive reform. I'm pleased that we're establishing a combined county authority in Lancashire. Our ambition is for mayors across all areas of England who can take advantage of the powers set out in the devolution white paper, including in Lancashire.
Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I declare my interest as the Governor of the Royal Berkshire Hospital and a family member has shares in the medical company. In the gallery today are patients who use the Royal Berkshire Hospital. Parts of its estate are crumbling as we speak, and it urgently needs a rebuild, but we're going to have to wait until at least 2037. Can the Prime Minister please explain to these visitors and the House why he thinks that it is acceptable that staff and patients dodge buckets collecting rainwater from leaking roofs for another 18 years? And will he meet with them and explain it to them face to face?
Well, I'm grateful to him for raising this on behalf of his constituents. So I speak obviously to them, and his constituents will hear the answer. There wasn't a plan for this building. It was a pretend plan. It was a fiction. It was unfunded and it was undeliverable. It only existed in the head of Boris Johnson. And they're the frustration for his constituents, and I really understand it. They thought, because they were promised, that they were going to get something which the party opposite knew was never going to be delivered. That is absolutely unforgivable. We will pick that up. We've put in place a funded scheme to build as quickly as we can, but it's got to be funded, it's got to be deliverable. That's the difference between the approach that we're taking and the approach that they took. And of course I'll make sure a relevant minister meets with him and his constituents in order to explain that more fully to them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In China, DeepSeek has developed an AI model almost as good as the most advanced technology from OpenAI. In the US, they're investing up to $500 billion in building out data centres. Now, to build data centres, you need two things: lots of energy and ideally cold weather. Fortunately, Scotland has both of those in abundance. So will the Prime Minister back Glasgow being an AI growth zone to help bring investment and solidify the UK's place as the third largest AI market on earth?
Well, I thank my honourable friend. What a contrast, the SNP, a strong Labour voice championing economic growth in Scotland. The AI developments this week show why we're right to put artificial intelligence at the heart of our plan for change. We've already secured £39 billion of AI investment, which will create 13,000 jobs across the UK. I agree with him that Scotland has real potential for AI growth zones. I'll make sure that he gets to meet with a relevant minister to discuss.
John Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency of Horsham, my local council faces a £500,000 tax bill from the rise in national insurance, and my local hospice, St Catherine's, has had to mothball a brand new ward. What message does the Prime Minister have for all the public services that are outright losers at the hands of the very tax that's supposed to save them?
Well, I'm grateful for him for raising this. As he knows, the settlement to local councils was an increase this year, so they have more money to deal with the problems they face. They were underfunded, broken by the last government. We've now put that support, that funding in place. That's the right thing to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It was such great news when the government decided that it was right to pay compensation to the LGBT veterans who'd unfairly lost their jobs. But unfortunately, they're not alone. There are others who've been prepared to lay down their lives on behalf of the country who have also been treated disgracefully. I include in that list my constituent who was sacked from MI6 simply for being gay. Would my right honourable friend please commit to righting that wrong and for meeting my constituent?
Well, I'm grateful to her raising this really important issue. All those who serve our country deserve our fullest respect and gratitude. Mr. Speaker, that's why we're righting the historic wrongs inflicted on LGBT veterans, already significantly increasing compensation available and enabling them to get their ranks restored. I know the issue she's raised is a real issue to the Foreign Secretary. He's looking at it, and I'll make sure she gets to talk to him about it, but we do need to deal with this historic injustice. She's right about that.
Jim Allister.
Thank you. Given the strategic commitment to Irish unity in the programme for government of the new government in Dublin, can I ask the Prime Minister whether he and his government have a strategic and economic interest in retaining Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom? And if they do, why then is he continuing with a system whereby, in over 300 areas of law in the economic sphere, Northern Ireland is subject not to UK law, but to the same laws that apply in the Irish Republic, laws we don't make and can't change?
Mr. Speaker, we're proud of and totally committed to the Good Friday Agreement. And Northern Ireland matters to this government. It matters to me. He will know I worked there for 5 years with the police service in Northern Ireland. I want to see Northern Ireland secure, safe, for all communities and thriving in the future, and I believe that it can be, and we'll be doing everything to make sure that it does.
Elvin Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow marks the 20th anniversary of the loss of Royal Air Force aircraft X-Ray Victor 179 and the 10 UK service personnel that were killed on board. Known to their friends as Steady, Smudge, Gary Nick, Pards, Gibbo, Richie, Bob, Dave, Jonesy and Paddy. These people were killed on a routine flight between Baghdad and Balad as a result of a poorly protected aircraft. This was the largest single loss of life in the Iraq War. Would the Prime Minister join with me to thank and recognise our service personnel for their service and their sacrifice, and the stoicism of their family as we join to commemorate such a tragic moment?
Well, I thank him for reminding the House of this case, and I know that condolences of the whole House remain with the families of these brave soldiers. We will never forget the vital role they played to support the coalition operation in Iraq. Can I thank him and pay tribute to his service? We are immensely proud of our armed forces and their courage and dedication as they keep our country safe.
Sir Jeremy Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister may know that this time last week, representatives of those who've been injured seriously by COVID vaccines were giving evidence to the COVID inquiry, including my constituent Kate Scott. I hope he also knows that the compensation available to those people isn't adequate and isn't adequately accessible. I'm grateful to the Health Secretary for the thought I know he is giving to how that position may be remedied. But can I ask the Prime Minister to give his personal support to that objective? Not just because it's the right thing to do for the people affected, but also because it will support the objective we should all share to maintain public confidence in vaccination.
Well, thank you for raising this, and as he says, the Health Secretary is looking at it, and I can assure him I will also look at it with the Health Secretary, and we will get back to him as we do so.
Rachel Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, I heard a story from an elderly resident in Bedworth. Colin Basra phoned the GP surgery to make an appointment for his elderly wife and was told no appointments would be available for 3 months. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this is utterly shocking and horrifying and is a direct result of 14 years of neglect by the party opposite?
I thank her for raising it. She's right to raise it. She's absolutely right. The damage they did to the NHS was absolutely unforgivable. We are taking steps to make sure more GP appointments will be available. We're getting the waiting list down. We're putting the investment in the NHS. As with everything else, we're clearing up the mess that they left behind.
Final question, Andrew Rosender.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister should know that my constituents in Romford are shocked, angry and dismayed by the suggestion by the ONS that the population of this country will rise to 72.5 million by 2032. Mr. Speaker, that's 500,000 people a year, which is unsustainable. Who voted for that? And will the government do something to ensure that the population of this country is sustainable going forward? Because there is no mandate for such a colossal increase in immigration in this country.
I think he should talk to his leader. Because net migration went through the roof under the last government, nearly 1 million, quadrupled. And who was cheering it on? Who was cheering it on? The leader of the opposition. His constituents are right to be concerned about the loss of control by the last government. We're taking control. We will bring these numbers down. But the record is absolutely clear, and it sits right there.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. We'll let the front bench change over. To the statement, I call the Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I would like to update the House on the government's work to unlock investment and secure economic growth. This is the #1 mission of this government, Mr. Speaker, because without growth, we cannot deliver on the priorities of the British people. It will mean that we can't cut NHS waiting lists or rebuild our schools or put more police on our streets. This is why our pursuit of growth is our first mission, putting our country on a new path towards a brighter future after 14 years of failure from the Conservatives. By helping businesses to invest and create wealth, they can provide jobs and opportunities that change lives, putting more pounds in people's pockets and rejuvenating communities across the country. And we have seen progress here already, Mr. Speaker, with huge private sector investments into our country since this government came into service. But now we must go faster and we must go further. We must help businesses and places to achieve their potential. And we do this by being an active and strategic state, one that works in true partnership with businesses, investors and local leaders to deliver for the British people in every corner of the country. This principle was at the heart of the Chancellor's speech earlier today in Oxfordshire, where she announced the latest steps this government is taking to drive growth across the country. And I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, to update the House on these announcements now. The economic growth that we are pursuing, Mr. Speaker, must reach into every town, city and community across the United Kingdom. Inclusive growth for everyone, not just for those at the top. Because there is untapped talent and unrealised opportunity throughout the country, and we cannot let that go to waste any longer. If we can raise the productivity of major cities like Manchester, Birmingham and Leeds just to the national average, then we will deliver an extra £33 billion in economic output. So I can confirm that our plans for regional growth will be hardwired into the spending review, into the infrastructure strategy, into the industrial strategy and into our approach to trade and investment. We are already providing £200 million of funding to support development of a new mass transit system in West Yorkshire. And at the autumn budget, we secured improved connections between towns and cities from Manchester through to York. And we are developing our plans to further improve connectivity in the north and across the country through our 10-year infrastructure strategy, which will set out our long-term vision for social and economic infrastructure across the country. Today, Mr. Speaker, we are progressing with the Wrexham and Flintshire Investment Zone, focusing on the area's incredible strengths in advanced manufacturing to leverage in £1 billion of private investment and to create up to 6,000 new jobs. As the Chancellor announced at Davos last week, the Office for Investment will work hand in hand with local areas to develop opportunities for international inward investment, starting with Liverpool City Region and North East Combined Authorities, while the National Wealth Fund will build on its strengthened combined authority engagement to build a pipeline of investable propositions with mayors, starting with strategic partnerships in Glasgow City Region, West Yorkshire, the West Midlands and Greater Manchester. And sticking with Manchester, we are giving our support to the Mayor of Greater Manchester's plan for the redevelopment of Old Trafford, creating new housing, new commercial developments and a new stadium, but I am advised to inform the House not necessarily government-wide support for the team which play there. I'm pleased to update the House, Mr. Speaker, on our new approach to the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor, a hugely exciting opportunity for the UK and the British economy. For centuries, these two cities have been synonymous with inspiration, invention and innovation. Economic analysis suggests that, with the right support, the region could bring a GDP boost of £78 billion by 2035. Yet time and time again, governments have failed to capitalise on this remarkable area, most recently in 2021, when the last government dropped its commitment to what it called the Oxcam ARC project. Through underinvestment, poor transport connections and a lack of affordable housing, the incredible growth potential of the area has been squandered, as people and businesses have been forced to move and invest elsewhere. No longer. Lord Vallance will act as our champion for the growth corridor, utilising his impressive experience in life sciences, academia and government to unlock growth opportunities across the region and promote its potential to investors across the world. And we will establish a new growth commission for Oxford to recognise and capitalise on the growth potential of this historic city. We already know, Mr. Speaker, of course, that transportation is a huge factor in the success of the country. Heathrow is the UK's only hub airport and the UK's largest air freight hub by volume, connecting us to emerging markets around the world, opening up new opportunities for trade and investment. But its growth has been constrained for decades. Today, we are announcing that the government supports and is inviting proposals for a third runway at Heathrow Airport to be brought forward by the summer. This is an important infrastructure project expected to have positive growth impacts across the United Kingdom and has the backing of businesses and business groups like the CBI, the FSB, and the British Chambers of Commerce, as well as trade unions like the GMB and Unite. According to a recent study from Frontier Economics, a third runway could increase GDP by 0.43% over the next 25 years. Over half, 60% of that boost would go to areas outside of London and the South East. It could create over 100,000 jobs in the local area and maintain Heathrow status both as a global passenger hub and the UK's largest air freight hub by volume. Reforms that this government has introduced to speed up the planning system will ensure delivery of this project and will set it up for success. Once proposals have been received, the government will take forward a full assessment through the Airport National Policy Statement to ensure that any scheme is delivered in line with our legal, environmental and climate obligations. We want the scheme to be value for money, and our clear expectation is that any surface transport costs associated with the project will be financed by private capital and should be sustainable and low carbon. The Secretary of State for Transport will also set out planning decisions for further airport expansion at Gatwick and Luton shortly. Crucially, I'm also pleased to announce that we are taking further steps in our transition to greener, cleaner aviation. At the start of this month, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Mandate became law. Sustainable aviation fuel reduces carbon dioxide emissions compared to fossil jet fuel by around 70%. Today, we are announcing an additional £63 million for the Advanced Fuels Fund over the next year, and we've set out the details of how we will deliver a revenue certainty mechanism. These measures will support investment and high-skilled green jobs in plants across the United Kingdom, delivering sustainable aviation fuel here in the UK for UK consumption. Transportation is equally important on a local level, and this is as true for the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor as it is for anywhere else. So this government has confirmed that it will provide crucial funding for transport links, including upgrades to the A428 to reduce journey times between Milton Keynes, Bedford and Cambridge, and East West Rail with new services between Oxford and Milton Keynes starting this year. We have already received submissions to the New Towns Task Force to build new developments along the new railway, and at Tempsford we will accelerate delivery of a mainline station on the East Coast Main Line so travellers can get to London in under an hour and to Cambridge in under 30 minutes once the East-West Rail has been delivered. And we will ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the pioneering work which has long been a hallmark of this area will continue. We are today committing to a new AI growth zone in Culham. We welcome Cambridge University's plan for a new flagship innovation hub in the centre of Cambridge and a new Cambridge Cancer Research Hospital as part of Wave 1 of the new hospital programme will be delivered. And just yesterday, Moderna completed the build for their new vaccine production and research and development site in Harwell while committing to invest £1 billion in the United Kingdom. Proof, Mr. Speaker, that when you create the conditions for success, businesses can lead the way. I am also pleased, Mr. Speaker, to confirm for the House that the Environment Agency is lifting its objections to specific developments in Cambridge. So we will press on with plans to develop 4,500 additional homes, new schools, office, retail and lab spaces in and around Cambridge. And in a further boost to the area, we have now agreed water resource management plans with water companies, unlocking £7.9 billion of investment in water resources in the next 5 years, including the new Fens Reservoir serving Cambridge and the South East Strategic Reservoir near Oxford. Mr. Speaker, this government has come in with a purpose, to bring growth and with it opportunity to the country. In just 6 months, we have taken the tough decisions to make that possible, and we are taking on the responsibility of a government that delivers real change for people, no longer the hollow promises of the Conservative Party, but change delivered under this Labour government. Working with business, working with local leaders to drive the growth that will lift up this country. Now, Mr. Speaker, we must go further and faster so that the next generation and the generation after that will have the opportunities that they deserve to ensure that Britain is strong and successful once again in a fast-changing world, and so that everybody in this country can have the chance to succeed. Today's announcement, Mr. Speaker, will help to make that a reality and shows how our plan for change will build a better Britain, and I commend the statement to the House.
Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chief Secretary told us that growth is the #1 mission of this government, and he added, now we must go faster, which I have to tell him suggests a certain lack of ambition. What we do not need, Mr. Speaker, is some hasty manana moment of unquantified, vague promises of a better tomorrow. We need action now to reverse the grievous damage this Chancellor has wrought just in her first 6 months in office. So the first question I have is, why did the government deliver a budget which the independent OBR said would lead to lower growth, higher inflation, higher interest rates and would cost jobs? And I have to tell the right honourable gentleman that going for growth in the 2030s means nothing to the businesses who have already stopped hiring, shed workers or put up prices thanks to Labour's ruinous policies. Mr. Speaker, it is hard to escape the conclusion that these announcements have been hastily cobbled together by a government which is under increasing pressure to change course but is seemingly incapable of doing so. So I ask the right honourable gentleman, why have these announcements only come now, when the Labour Party had years in opposition and had months in government leading up to its first budget? Now, Mr. Speaker, if the government really did want to unleash investment, innovation and the private sector, they should not have decided in the autumn to have substantially increased the tax burden and the size of the state. By doing so, far from encouraging private investment, they are actively squeezing it out. So can I ask the Chief Secretary to reassure businesses right now that there will be no further growth-destroying fiscal measures, including tax rises, in the spring statement? Mr. Speaker, is not the truth that the damage is already being done? That is the case even before the party opposite's tax rises bite in April. The economy is flatlining. That is happening right now. So I ask the right honourable gentleman, will any of these announcements actually have an impact within this Parliament? And what impact are they likely to have, if any, on the OBR's forecasts in March? Mr. Speaker, incredibly, the Chancellor said in her speech that businesses are what drive growth and the government should support them. Yet this is a government that has driven business confidence off a cliff, taxed it to the hilt, and through its upcoming employment legislation will be hitting them still further and with ever more job-destroying red tape. So can the Chief Secretary set out what the overall impact of government policy decisions since July has been on regulatory costs for businesses? And does he agree with the Business Secretary's extraordinary utterance on the media this morning that the government has not hammered businesses? The Chancellor claimed this morning she has seen no alternative suggestions from the opposition. Let me give her one now. Last year, the Conservative manifesto included £12 billion in welfare savings. At the time, the Labour Party said the money simply isn't there. Now we are told that the government will shortly be coming forward with plans for welfare reform, another Damascene conversion. Mr. Speaker, if they had grasped this issue when they came into office, they could have tackled the rising welfare bill rather than taxing jobs and killing growth. Their failure to act means that businesses and millions of people are paying the price. So can the right honourable gentleman today commit to matching that £12 billion? Or can he at least tell us the scale of savings we can expect from his promised reforms? Mr. Speaker, some of the announcements made today are of course welcome. The role of the opposition is not to oppose for opposition's sake, not least because many of the measures are reheated from the previous Conservative government. The plans on pension investment, for example, seem oddly familiar to us, probably because they were simply to continue the reforms that I was bringing in when I was Secretary of State at Work and Pensions. But even here, we must wait and see before passing judgment, because the fact of the matter is this government have shown we simply cannot trust their word. They promised not to raise taxes, they did. They promised not to cut winter fuel payments, they did. They promised not to borrow more, and they did. We need to see action, not just words. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor talks about removing barriers to growth. Oh yes, she talks about it. But this talk comes from the same person whose budget killed the economy and growth, stone dead. Absolutely. If we are looking to remove the greatest barriers to growth in this country, perhaps we should start with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Chief Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, look, the House is indebted to the Shadow Chancellor, Mr. Speaker. A lecture from Mr. Momentum himself on the need for speed from this government. Well, let me tell him that in the last 6-7 months, this government's done more than that lot did in the last 14 years. Mr. Speaker, and he's asked me, Mr. Speaker, he's asked me about our plans working with business. The comments from business leaders and investors today speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. Our plans are welcome from business and we'll be working in partnership with them to deliver for this country. And he asked me about work, Mr. Speaker. Look, the Labour Party makes no secret of the fact that we like to support people into work. That's why we were created in the first place. Strong, secure work, with rights at work, with secure incomes to help make your family finances add up. But the real truth in the data, Mr. Speaker, is under the last government, too many people were waiting at home sick, unable to get their NHS appointment, unable to get access to mental health services so that they could be helped back into work. Too many people were waiting at home, waiting for training, unable to be able to seize the opportunities advertised in front of them. This Labour government will not take that as a luxury. We will work at speed to give people the work that they deserve. And Mr. Speaker, I think the heart of the Shadow Chancellor's statement was a truth for the country to consider. That under the last administration, it was promises cancelled, and under this administration, it's promises being delivered.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome this government's commitment to infrastructure investment and for telling the world that Britain is open for business. But to deliver on all of this, we'll need a really skilled workforce to deliver on these major construction projects. So could the right honourable gentleman set out how the government is going to make sure that we've got the skills to deliver what he's promised today?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee for her question. This is an important test of turning policy into real-world delivery, and through our infrastructure and industrial strategies, we are engaging right now with businesses and investors across the country so that as we bring forward our plans, we have a skills and training system that actually creates opportunities for people to take the jobs that we need them to do to help get Britain building. This will be a crucial part of our approach to infrastructure so that every person across the country can seize the benefits of the plans of this government.
Daisy Cooper, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is absolutely right to focus on economic growth, but their blinkered approach on Europe is holding back British businesses and stifling the very growth we need to fund our public services. By ruling out negotiations on a bespoke customs union and a youth mobility scheme with the EU, the Chancellor's dash for growth will be more like a slow crawl in a car with the handbrake on. In order to turbocharge economic growth, will the government start negotiating these initiatives now? Mr. Speaker, to unleash growth through our small businesses, the Chancellor should scrap her national insurance contributions rise and instead seek to raise the same amount of money through the measures that we Liberal Democrats have suggested, reversing the tax cuts on the big banks, increasing taxes on the big tech and gaming companies and reforming capital gains tax in a way that would be fairer and raise more money. Will the government look again at these alternative revenue raises and lift the burden that government has placed on small business? On airports, the Chancellor has voiced her support for Heathrow expansion and suggested it will be forthcoming for other airports, something that we Liberal Democrats oppose because it will deliver minimal growth but at huge cost to the climate. Can the government confirm if they intend to abide by the advice from their own climate change advisers that no airport expansions should proceed until a UK-wide capacity management framework is in place? In the midst of a climate emergency, can the government give a cast-iron guarantee that the so-called refreshed carbon budget that the Chancellor referred to will not water down climate targets? And what does the government have to say to those experts who say that sustainable aviation fuel is not realistic or scalable? On the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor, Mr Speaker, we really welcome plans that further boost the UK's position as a European and global science leader. Can the Government confirm that there will be enough money for the whole of the route to be constructed on the East-West Rail route? And will the Government confirm that they will work hand in glove with local authorities to minimise the environmental impacts, introduce infrastructure before or alongside housing, and maximise local community benefits?
Minister. Thank you, Mr Speaker. As the Honourable Lady knows, this Government committed in its manifesto not to rejoining the single market or the customs union. We will honour that promise. But the trade deal that the previous government put together was clearly not good enough. There is room for us to improve our trading, energy and security relationships with our friends in the European Union, and my ministerial colleagues are in active discussions with their counterparts to take that forward. She invited me to speculate on any future budgets. Of course, that's above my pay grade, but I'm sure the Chancellor heard her suggestions. And on airports, as I said in my statement, Mr Speaker, all of our plans will be in line with our legal obligations, and of course we do recognise the need for more sustainable fuel and sustainable transport as part of these expansion plans. She last asked me about something I can't read in my own handwriting. So the House will have to... Oh, East-West Rail, thank you. I thought it was EU again, and I couldn't read my handwriting. East-West Rail. The whole premise of the growth corridor, of course, is that you have that transport spine through the corridor that allows for all of the developments around housing or lab space or communities around it. So it's a crucial part of our plans, and we will make sure that it's delivered.
John Morrow.
Congratulate the Chief Secretary and the Chancellor of the Exchequer on a plan for growth which is both concrete in terms of shovels in the ground now and also forward-looking, building on our scientific and skills base to drive long-term jobs and higher living standards. Now, I know that the Heathrow expansion will help businesses in the North East, but for the sake of those of us who are not Manchester United fans, could he clarify that much of the investment in the Man U development will be private sector based, and could he also set out how it will help the rest of the North, and particularly Newcastle United fans like myself?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Chair of the Science and Technology Committee for her question. She and her committee knows the huge advantage we have in the UK with our brilliant universities and research and development ecosystem, which is why we are supporting them and putting rocket boosters underneath their activity to develop world-leading and frontier research and innovation, but also stimulate economic growth across the country. The Honourable Lady is right that the development in Manchester is a broad set of developments, private financed around housing and commercial opportunities, as well as the work that Manchester United want to do in relation to their football stadium. I'm afraid I should inform the House now that I probably can't give a running commentary of the stadium applications for all football clubs across the country, and she'll have to forgive me for not knowing the latest plans for Newcastle.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
Can I welcome the government's conversion to a third runway at Heathrow? The sort of connectivity that enables, particularly with fast-growing economies in Asia and the Gulf, is essential to growth. But what assurance can the Chief Secretary to the Treasury give to the House that this project won't be subsequently stymied by an absolutist approach driven by ideology towards carbon emissions, which will drive it into the ground at a later moment, because we've been down this path before?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Member knows he's been down the path before, because it was his government that went down it and blocked all of these developments from happening over the last 14 years. The reason this government is working on reforms to the planning system and looking at national policy statements, thinking about our skills and infrastructure supply chains, unlocking private capital, is because we are a government that wants to get Britain building again, not blocking the projects that have been stalled for years under the last administration.
Select Committee Member Jivan Sandhu.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Investment is what makes us more prosperous, it makes us produce more work, it gets wages rising and it creates good jobs. And I'm an East Midlands MP and we have some of the lowest investment rates in the country, the lowest transport infrastructure, some of the lowest private investment as well. It's why I welcome the announcement today of £1 billion going to the manufacturing and logistics hub at the East Midlands Airport. I especially welcome the 2,000 extra jobs that my constituents in Loughborough, Shepshed and Havant will benefit from. But can the Chief Secretary assure me there's just the beginning of investment we could expect to see in the region and indeed for my constituents?
Yes, sir.
I thank my honourable friend, who is a strong advocate for the economy in the East Midlands and for his constituency. He will know that I visited the region last week and met with businesses and investors with our mayor in the region, Claire Ward. They're doing a brilliant job to secure inward investment into the region, and there's a huge amount of untapped potential in the East Midlands. I'm pleased the Chancellor was able to make announcements today, and we very much look forward to hearing for more business cases and more potentials in the future so we can unlock growth in the East Midlands.
Select Committee Member Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm sure the Chief Secretary knows and admires the plan for growth of Worcestershire County Council, which is Conservative-led. They've been working through it. They've built a new train station on the North Cotswold line, which connects Worcestershire to Oxford. And a lot of that line is still single track. So will he urge the Oxford Growth Commission to have a look at the extensive work that's been done by Oxfordshire County Council and Worcestershire County Council to find a way to double the frequency of the train services on that stretch of track?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady. The Growth Commission will be looking at all potential options for stimulating growth. We want to try to find these strategic enabling investments across the country to unlock, for example, house building and inward investment, and I'm sure they'll look at those proposals with interest.
Select Committee Member Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Chief Secretary for his statement about investment and growth? And does he agree with me that the role that new towns will play in tackling our country's housing crisis, and how important it is that alongside the homes in the new towns, we see the delivery of new social infrastructure as well? And can he outline with me how those plans will be working?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. As I informed the House recently, our infrastructure strategy, which will be published in June, will for the first time align social infrastructure plans on schools, GP surgeries and other public service facilities with our housing plans and our economic infrastructure plans. So for the first time, we'll be making strategic decisions around places where people live. And I'll just say on the house building target, as I met with tenants moving into new social homes being built in Erewash last week, we talk about 1.5 million homes, we talk about economic growth. Actually, in every one of these buildings is someone's life, their opportunities, the dreams that they want to fulfill. This government is delivering on economic growth, but it's doing so because the people at the heart of all of these decisions are the people that we need to get the economy moving and Britain doing well in the future.
Select Committee Member John Clare.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the fundamental enablers of growth in the economy is financial services and opening up the markets to invest. I think there was a consensus across this House in the last Parliament in the Financial Services and Markets Act that gave that the framework to do that. Could I ask the Chief Secretary what concrete proposals have come forward and are under consideration from the FCA and the PRA to change some of the restrictions that stop the right levels of investment? This week, the government enabled, I think, around 100 billion of surplus funds from DB pension schemes to be made available. Can he confirm that what proportion of that money will be actually invested in what time frame? Because I think the concern around these announcements is the delay to tangible, calculable economic impact.
Minister.
I thank the right honourable member. I would point him to the Chancellor's Mansion House speech, which set out in detail this government's approach to financial services, an important enabler for the UK and a particular strength that we have globally, as I know he knows very well. In respect of his particular question, I will need to write to him with the answer, but what he can see is that this government is taking action to unlock investment into the UK economy, and as has been reported, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have been meeting with regulators to make sure that they are geared for growth as well as for protecting consumers.
Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I also welcome the Chief Secretary's statement today and the Chancellor's announcement about the many excellent transport schemes that this country so badly needs. And the Transport Select Committee will look at these proposals, but starting with looking at the new proposal for runway 3 at Heathrow. He links this proposal to all UK-wide growth, but did the Treasury consider figures that the DfT had in 2020 that predicted that between 2010 and 2050 there would be a 24% cut in flights between regional airports in the UK and Heathrow because of the way the market for slots at Heathrow actually operates, rather than what regional airports say they might want?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, the Chair of the Transport Select Committee, for her question. I think the question alludes to the fact that this is not just the announcement of a runway, but it's the announcement of a project where we need to make sure that it's optimised for delivering growth for the whole of the United Kingdom, as I made clear in my statement. That does mean we'll need to work with regional airports. We will need to look at how the slots are allocated at Heathrow to make sure that Heathrow's business model optimises opportunities for regional airports and the whole of the United Kingdom. And that is a commitment that the government has made very clear today.
Select Committee Member Bobby Dee.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The whole House supports a focus on growth. It's good for our prosperity and key to funding our public services. But growth not only has a rate, but a direction too. And how we seek to achieve growth is about choices. And if we choose to back measures that undermine our net zero targets, then we might be going for growth today with severe consequences for tomorrow. So how does the government justify its choice to back Heathrow expansion over more sustainable rail transport projects across the country?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member. I'm sure he will share my view that you can achieve growth through your net zero plans. These things are not an either or. And for example, the announcement on this government supporting investment into Heathrow today and our investment into the sustainable aviation fuel sector will stimulate investment into net zero technologies and industry in the UK. This can be a win-win for the economy and for the environment.
Honor Naismith.
Deputy Speaker, and can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement today, which I think demonstrates a real commitment by this government to take the shackles off our economy. And can I particularly welcome his commitment to a 10-year transport infrastructure plan, as well as the measures already announced to boost connectivity across the Pennines and elsewhere. Will he commit to continuing to see what can be done to address connectivity and capacity challenges north of Birmingham arising from the cancellation of HS2?
I thank my honourable friend. These are exactly the issues that departments are now considering as they bid to the Treasury in the spending review. As we move into those negotiations in March, we will have to look at the best growth potential for those and what we can get delivered on what time frame, and we'll be able to confirm those plans in the coming months.
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's nothing in the statement today about the Lower Thames crossing, already delayed twice by this government, one of the biggest infrastructure projects, which is going to have a huge impact on the entire country in terms of that crossing and what it's going to do. Also, for my constituents, the biggest issues around growth, when I'm visiting businesses, are around those taxes which have been introduced on business, particularly on family companies, and also on the jobs tax. Why isn't the government actually addressing those real issues, which are just not addressed in the statement today?
Minister.
The Chancellor will be very disappointed, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the honourable member didn't listen to her speech. The Chancellor did announce today in her speech that we are in, because, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are in negotiations with the project leaders at Lower Thames Crossing. We are committed to bringing it forward, and we'll have further announcements to make in due course.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the Chief Secretary on his statement, but add a word of caution on his plans for Heathrow? Will he ensure there's a full cost-benefit analysis of any plans for a third runway that looks at the costs to the climate, to public health, and to already saturated transport infrastructure? Almost 40 years of dealing with Heathrow has taught me that what is good for Heathrow's shareholders is usually bad for its neighbours, for the climate, and that it's government at all levels that's left to pick up the costs and clean up the mess.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I know he's been working on this issue for many years. As I've said previously, we want this Heathrow project to be a success for the whole country, and that means in relation to sustainable low-carbon transport connectivity, but also for local jobs and the local economy. As I said in my statement, as proposals are put forward by Heathrow, the government will consider them in the normal way, in line with all of our legal obligations.
Sarah Olney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
In November 2024, giving evidence to the Treasury Select Committee, the head of the OBR, Richard Hughes, stated that further investment in infrastructure, such as extending airport capacity, will not deliver high economic returns as the UK is already highly connected. So without a proposal on the table for Heathrow, how can the Chancellor be so sure that a third runway will drive high national economic growth?
I thank the honourable member. We hear from businesses, investors, business people, travellers, people that want to be able to come through London or the UK, that we are losing trade and investment in relation to other hub airports on the mainland in Europe. We have every opportunity to secure that here in the UK. That will, by its very nature, secure investment, jobs and economic growth.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Earlier, the Chancellor highlighted the redevelopment of Old Trafford in her speech. But similar investment is happening in Luton, with Power Court set to be the new home of Luton Town Football Club. This mixed-use housing and commercial development will bring new opportunities and support regeneration of our town. So can I invite the Minister to join me on a visit to see how it will be a key driver of economic growth across Bedfordshire and the Eastern region?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. She knows I don't get let out of the Treasury very often, but when I do, I'm sure I will be delighted to come and visit. And look, Madam Deputy Speaker, these are classic examples where, by working with private investors and local businesses, working together to coordinate investment on maybe road junctions or rail or housing developments or even football stadia, that you can get to a point where you unlock economic growth for people, improve their community, and we're absolutely interested to look at all of those opportunities.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With the increase in employers' national insurance contributions, what assessment has the Treasury made as to whether this will increase business investment or decrease it?
Minister.
I think the right honourable member is inviting me to speculate on the OBR forecast, which will be presented to the House on the 26th of March.
John McDonnell.
There's so much to be welcomed in this statement, but sadly I believe it has been tainted by the decision on the third runway at Heathrow. When such a decision is made by the Chancellor, by the government, it's important that there's full openness and transparency so that we can explain the government's thinking to our constituents. So could the Minister ensure that the papers that led to this Damascene conversion for some members of the Cabinet are published openly, that particularly those with regard to how to tackle the carbon emissions that will be increased, particularly in how it meets our carbon capacity statements. Secondly, how the agriculture in this country will be converted to meet the SAF requirements, how the noise contours will impact upon so many more people, 2 million, how the emissions at the moment in terms of the air pollution will be tackled that are already above the legal limits, and also how the 8,000 to 10,000 of my constituents will be rehoused when 4,000 properties are demolished as a result of this decision.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As I confirmed to the House today, we are inviting applications from Heathrow which will be considered in the normal way. When those applications have been received and due diligence is undertaken, we'll be able to report the details that will answer his questions in due course.
Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It says on the cover that this is about growing the UK economy, but the substance of the statement is much more about growing the English economy, because it has a passing reference to Wrexham and a nebulous acknowledgement that, and I quote, they will build a pipeline of investable propositions starting with strategic partnerships in the Glasgow City region. Well, perhaps the Chief Secretary can explain, flesh out what that means, and at the same time explain why he didn't allocate any funding to reimburse Edinburgh University for the supercomputer, invest in SAF in Grangemouth, or invest in the Acorn project in the North East.
Minister.
Scotland is an important part of our United Kingdom economy. We will continue to invest in the country, as we did at the recent budget, with the largest real terms increase in spending ever since devolution to the government. And look, I'm always ears open to opportunities for growth, but I suggest he might want to speak to his SNP colleagues in the Scottish Government and try to stimulate some investment there as well.
Order. Paul War.
Speaker, can I warmly welcome today's plan for growth, which stands in stark contrast to the low-growth, low-wage, low-investment economy of the last 14 years. But as welcome as the Old Trafford development is, the House will know I'm a Dale fan, and can I therefore urge the Treasury and himself to warmly support the Atom Valley Mayoral Development Zone, which is being pushed by Andrew Burnham to help advance manufacturing in Rochdale?
I thank my honourable friend. It sounds like an excellent initiative in his constituency that will benefit from the huge untapped potential from the Greater Manchester and regional economy that we're trying to stimulate with our announcements today, and I'd be delighted to meet with him to understand the details in more detail in due course.
Martin Victor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In his speech, the Chief Secretary said he wanted economic growth to spread to every town, city and community, something we can all agree with. I have been campaigning for many years to restore the direct